In the early 2000s, the FBI believed they had found a useful asset in a man named Scott Kimball. He appeared intelligent, resourceful, and eager to assist law enforcement in exchange for leniency on his own legal troubles. To the outside world, he looked like someone trying to turn his life around, someone working with the government to put dangerous criminals behind bars. But behind this mask of cooperation lay a monster whose true motives were far darker than anyone could have imagined. Born in 1966, Kimball grew up in Colorado, spending much of his life drifting between jobs, scams, and petty crimes. He was a natural manipulator, smooth-talking, persuasive, and capable of earning the trust of nearly anyone he encountered. By the time he was in his 30s, Kimball had already racked up a long record of fraud and theft, cycling in and out of prison. But in 2002, his life took a turn that would forever change the course of countless others. The FBI recruited Kimball as an informant, believing he could help expose criminal activity while serving time for check fraud. To the agency, he was an asset with insider access. To Kimball, however, the arrangement was an opportunity, a chance not just for freedom, but for cover. While working under the protection of the FBI, he was free to move in and out of dangerous circles, all while hiding his own dark desires. What no one realized at the time was that Scott Kimball wasn't helping stop crime. He was committing it, and he would go on to become one of the most notorious serial killers in Colorado history, all while the FBI unknowingly gave him the perfect cover, a trail of death and deception. Between 2003 and 2004, at least 4 people mysteriously disappeared, all of whom were later connected to Scott Kimball. His victims were not random strangers, but people drawn from his own twisted web of lies, manipulation, and opportunity. One of his first known victims was Leanne Emery, a 24-year-old woman who struggled with drug addiction, but had a family that loved her dearly. Kimball lured her into a false sense of security, promising money and adventure. He convinced her they could travel to Mexico together, but instead, he led her into the mountains of Colorado. There, far from witnesses, he shot her and left her body hidden in the wilderness. Then there was Jennifer Markham, a 25-year-old single mother who dreamed of building a better life. Jennifer became entangled with Kimball after being introduced through criminal associates. He promised her opportunities, offering to take her to California, where she could start fresh. She never made it. Her car was later found abandoned at the Denver airport. But Jennifer herself vanished without a trace. Kendra Horn, another young woman, was also connected to Kimball. She too disappeared, her life ending at his hands, her family left in the dark for years. And then there was his own uncle, 60-year-old Terry Kimball, who trusted Scott enough to live with him for a time. Terry, too, went missing. His death later confirmed as part of Scott's growing list of victims. What made the case so horrifying was not just the murders themselves, but the fact that Kimball carried them out while he was supposed to be under federal supervision. He met with FBI agents regularly, claiming he was gathering intelligence. Yet all the while he was luring victims, silencing them forever, and covering his tracks with practiced ease. For years, the disappearances were treated as isolated incidents. Families searched desperately, filing missing persons reports, clinging to hope that their loved ones might return. But behind closed doors, Kimball knew the truth. He had taken their lives, and with each kill, his confidence grew. Eventually, suspicion began to mount. The coincidences were too many, the connections too close. Slowly, investigators started piecing together a pattern, and the closer they looked, the more obvious it became. The man the FBI had trusted as an informant was, in fact, a predator hiding in plain sight. The fall of a predator. By 2006, pressure began building. Families demanded answers. Inconsistencies in Kimball's stories piled up, and his charming facade started to crack. The FBI, embarrassed and alarmed, was forced to confront the possibility that their informant had used them as cover for murder. Investigators finally uncovered evidence linking Kimball to the missing people. In time, bodies were found in remote locations across Colorado. Leanne Emery in the mountains, Kendra Horn's remains in the desert, Terry Kimball's body hidden, and traces of Jennifer Markham's fate still hauntingly unclear. When the truth came out, the scale of betrayal was staggering. Here was a man who had manipulated not only vulnerable victims, but also the very system designed to stop killers like him. For years, he had walked freely under federal approval, all while carrying out unspeakable crimes. Kimball eventually confessed to multiple murders, though he often shifted blame and withheld details, further tormenting the families of his victims. In 2009, he was sentenced to 70 years in prison after pleading guilty to 4 counts of second-degree murder. To many, the sentence felt like justice, but to the families, no number of years could erase the pain of what he had taken. Even behind bars, Kimball remained manipulative, constantly changing his story, offering partial confessions, and dangling information in exchange for favors. He thrived on control, and prison didn't strip him of his need to dominate those around him. Reflection on evil. The story of Scott Kimball is one of the most chilling examples of how evil can hide behind charm and authority. To his victims, he was a smooth talker, a man with promises of money, adventure, or stability. To the FBI, he was a valuable informant, someone who could bring down criminals. In reality, he was a predator, using every mask he could to hide his true face. The tragedy is not just in the lives lost, but in the failures that allowed Kimball to continue his spree unchecked. Families spent years searching for answers, unaware that the man responsible was being protected by the very agency meant to bring justice. The shame and regret within the FBI became a scar on their reputation, a reminder of what happens when oversight fails and trust is misplaced. Scott Kimball remains in prison today, but his story continues to serve as a warning. Evil does not always announce itself. Sometimes it wears a smile, sometimes it offers help, and sometimes it hides behind the badge of authority. For Leanne, Jennifer, Kendra, and Terry, that disguise was fatal. Their families still speak of them, not just as victims, but as people with dreams, laughter, and futures stolen away. And their memory is what transforms this case from a tale of horror into a reminder. Behind every headline is a human story, and behind every predator, a trail of shattered lives. If you found this story haunting and want to uncover more cases where darkness hides in plain sight, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There are countless more stories waiting, stories that show us not only the dangers of manipulation, but also the resilience of those left behind.